Golden Black Live, no Chiron today. We're still working on that, but that means I can do what I do every week. Drives Kyle nuts. I can just tell. Because Kyle is a perfectionist when it comes to broadcast media, and I apparently am not. But I'm Alan Karpick. This is Jafar Williams, Purdue's running backs coach. And you're not supposed to point at anybody, but I do it anyway. Stacy Clarity on the far side. When we get the Chiron fixed, we'll be sure to tell you.
Is that what that strip across the bottom is called?
Uh-huh.
Hey, I learned something today.
Yeah, and it's ready. It's good for segment 2, but since Kyle ducked out, we're banging on Kyle here. But and Matt Rector in the house as well, so we always appreciate Matt bringing the guys up. I'm sure he just loves it when we say that. But Coach, welcome to the show, and it's 1 degree out there, wind chill. I went for a run at lunch and got away from the ice, but you guys are going to be playing football on. No, we don't know if it's going to be out. Probably may not be outside on Tuesday, but it's going to get warm here by the end of next week. But spring ball, I know you as coaches, you're probably ready to go.
Oh, definitely. This is an exciting time because, one, you get to evaluate some of the guys you have on the team, some of the young guys, some of our early enrollee guys. So for me, it's exciting. It's the start of a new season, really.
Yeah, it's like Christmas when it comes to that. In terms of, not just Markel Jones, but the fact that everybody may be a little bit different. You hope everybody's improved, and there's room at the end, so to speak. There's playing time to be had.
Well, that's our strength staff does a great job during the off season, and I always tell the running backs, this is your opportunity to show how you've developed during the off season. So all of those guys are going to have an opportunity to compete, and it'll be an exciting room this spring.
Yeah.
Very young. You know, your oldest guys are three third-year sophomores. So where does I guess what challenges does that present for you? Do you coach differently when you have a younger group, or what's that like?
Well, I don't know if you coach differently. You have to be a lot more detail-oriented, maybe in the meeting rooms. I have to call on guys a little bit more just to keep them on their toes, make sure they know what they're doing, because you have a bunch of guys who haven't proven that they know the information. So sometimes when you got older guys, you assume, everything is directed towards the older guys in the room, but then you get the younger guys in there in the back. And so now it's like, hey, get up on the board and draw this up and show me that you know and can speak our language. So
we talk about Akeem Hunt for reasons that he was so productive and all those things, but he was a guy who didn't make very many mistakes for you guys. I mean, he had really, his MAs were way down, I think, especially by the end of the year. And that's something that you miss for a guy who really understands and grasps the offense that maybe people don't think about, right?
No doubt. You look at the two guys really who got the bulk of the reps with Akeem and Raheem, and I was going back through all of our grades throughout the season, and those guys didn't make a lot of mistakes. Now there were some technical things as far as pass protection breaking down, but it wasn't a missed assignment, which is awesome, and you do take that for granted sometimes, and but it also showed me, those guys knew what they were doing when we lined up on Saturdays.
Is it harder to get the schemes down for what you need done there than where they're supposed to go when they carry the football, or where they're supposed to go on pass routes? Is that the hardest thing?
Yeah, because I think, the running stuff, you're going to give them footwork and aiming points, but a lot of that is when a guy gets the ball in his hand, he's gifted, can he figure it out on his own, be his own blocker, those types of things. Where pass protection, it's so much more in depth and detail. They have to know who the offensive line is responsible for, who they're pointing to, who we have in protection. So there's a lot more thinking involved, and that's where your younger players struggle.
Yeah, no question.
With kind of the younger group too, it's a different style of group too. I mean, just the guys in the room. You have 5 scholarship guys in the spring, and they're different. They're going to bring different things, right? And then what you guys, and what fans, I guess, we're used to with kind of the speed guys with Hunt and Mostert.
Well, I always say now what you have is, instead of last year being 3, 4, 30, 60, 70-yard games, now you're going to get a guy who, is going to pound the ball for 10 yards, 8 yards, and then hopefully at the end of the game you look up and he has over 100 yards rushing. But you may not see the explosive plays. And the one thing that I told Coach Shoup and we talked about is we may have better in-between the tackle runners this year, no disrespect to Raheem and Akeem, but better guys inside the tackles and guys who are going to get on the perimeter and make big plays.
Does that change, and I guess John is the one who calls the plays, but does that change the style of offense that you will play then too? I mean, he's kind of like, well, the linemen are the same, they're going to block the same regardless of kind of who's behind, but you obviously want to play toward the strengths of your guys.
The only difference that I see, that I think it's going to be the same. I think as a play caller, you want to keep some consistency in how you call plays. The one area I think is going to change, I think you have the ability now for one guy or a couple guys to start to take over a game a little bit more. So you may have a drive when you have a guy like a Keontae or a DJ or hopefully Markel or Byers who are bigger backs. When they get going, keep them going. Keep handling the ball. So you may be on a 12-play drive where 9 of them are runs, as opposed to worrying about and keeping the hits off of Akeem and Raheem, so those guys stay fresh.
Keontae did reel off a couple big ones. Certainly one in Illinois last year. I mean, he can take it some distance. I mean, there's guys there that he did get caught, and he probably got reminded that he got caught, knowing how that works from time to time. But take a guy like Markel Jones, and only reason why I talk about him is I've been in front of him a very brief period of time. Very impressive young man, very intelligent young man. Still, should be a high school senior right now. I mean, there's a lot for a guy like that to learn. How do you set a guy like that up for success early on? I mean, what are the key things that you want to have him achieve from the get-go that will help be the building blocks for down the road?
Well, one, I think you have to establish a work ethic. You have to have him understand how important and how different it's going to be in college as far as studying the game as opposed to it was in high school. The other thing is I think you have to let him understand what he's responsible for. The one thing that I remember a coach when I was a player, he said, when you start coaching and you have to coach a young guy, don't give them so much information. Give them the information that they need to know, and then expand off of that. So I feel like when you have a young player, you got to do a great job of condensing what he needs to know. If you have to keep it as simple as that's the guy that you're responsible for in pass protection, and teach him the rest later, get him to understand that, and you'll have a chance.
And maybe because you have a little bit more of a chance, too, that you've got offensive line has some experience in several key places. That's going to help that situation.
Helps, no doubt.
Yeah.
I suppose we should ask the obvious question. It's just funny because I just talked to you on Monday, so I'm kind of saying the same things, but I'm going to ask you again, knowing that you won't answer. But who is going to be the number one guy?
Do you guys have a hat? Do you have a hat? We'll rip up pieces of paper, put some names on there, put them in a hat, and just pick one out, and he'll be the starter. How about that?
She's contractually obligated to ask these questions. You know that. So you're.
That says a lot, though.
It does. You know what? And honestly, I can tell you guys, I really don't know.
That's a fair
answer. That's as fair as the answer you're going to get. But I really want everybody to have an opportunity. That's one of the biggest things that we talked about as a staff is don't put ceilings on anybody. Everybody's starting from ground zero, and whoever emerges as a guy emerges as a guy. So.
How do you divvy that up then when you're talking about? I mean, if you're talking about 5 guys.
Yeah. Well, when we talked about personnel, I told Coach Shoop, I said, one period this guy may be with the ones, the next period he may be with the ones. I don't know if I'm going to do it like last year with Raheem and Akeem splitting reps with the ones.
Right.
You're going to get a whole period to work with the ones, and you're going to get a whole team period to work with the ones, and just rotate it by day, and hopefully within a week or so you start to see who's picking up the information and who's not.
That was my next question then. At what point do you cut back on that? I mean, how much chance do these guys get?
Well, we talked about that in our meeting the other day. I said, you're going to get opportunities until you mess those opportunities up. So if you can't handle the workload, if you're not making plays, you're putting the ball on the ground, obviously your opportunities are going to get less and less. And the guys that are doing the right things and making plays are going to get more opportunities.
It was interesting to watch last year just because Akeem from 2013 had more yards, certainly had more touches than Raheem. Raheem comes in as the starter. How was it when you break down what makes this guy a starter on day one? I mean, are there a list of 7 things you're looking for? Is this as much being able to quantify it, or in terms of being able to judge it by what they've done, or are you talking about it with other coaches? How did you arrive last year at what allowed Raheem to beat out Akeem from day one?
It's a collaboration of a lot of things, but coming out of spring, we really felt like at that time Raheem had made a lot of progress, and because he was still new at the position, you felt like, okay, he's made progress. Now, hopefully, he can take that next step.
Yeah.
So the opportunity was there for him, and then with Akeem, we were really trying to trying to use him in a bunch of different places at that time. We ended up getting to him being a starting running back, but it was, and I told him, Raheem knows this, but it was more the fault of Raheem putting the ball on the ground, and then Akeem just took advantage of that opportunity. He played unbelievable this year.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that with John Shoup when he was on, just talking about both the guys' potential for the league, but that his impressed just with what Akeem might be able to do at the next level. How do you see that in terms of what he might be able to get his full-time job doing that?
I think he's going to be a hell of a player at the next level. You just need one team to fall in love with you, and he ran well, which is great. But I think they're going to get a guy who's hungry, who loves football, who's really going to do anything to get on the field. And I think that's what he proved to us as a staff. He was unselfish. He said, okay, if I'm going to be a decoy in this play, that's fine. If I'm going to run a routes, that's fine. So you get a guy who's experienced running routes, which could help him as a third down back if that happens. And then obviously his willingness to play on special teams, but he's going to have a really good career at the next level.
Yeah. You need guys to catch the ball now for you too.
Yeah.
Being a former receiver yourself, being really enjoying that position, and John Shoup has raved about how you kind of cross-train those guys, but you can't only work with them as a receiver then. So how do you kind of manage that in practices, and how much do you work with them on that? And I mean, they know it's important. Obviously, it's important in your offense. I mean, Hunt's had tons of catches the last couple of years.
Well, I think that goes back to just preaching being a complete running back. Any opportunity that I get that's extra, so if it's typically what I do is doing field goal and field goal block, we're working on catching drills. It's one of those things where I want those guys to be good at everything. So you have to make sure you script time to do that if that's going to be the case. And I'm always conscious of that, and I think it shows up on game days because those guys don't put a lot of balls on the ground as far as receptions.
The mindset of trying to turn things around, and I mean, you guys took a big step last year, and trying to get it to the next level. What do you preach? What do you tell them day in, day out? What is your calling card to your guys and every day that they know that, hey, we have to make this step from 3 wins to whatever you get to this year? How do you manage that, and what's your thing that you want to emphasize to them as much as anything?
Well, the one thing I talk to the running backs about is, one, we have to be the most dominant group on the team. I always start there, especially in spring practice, and then we move forward. Okay, then we want to be one of the best groups in the conference, and then obviously in the nation. But I believe it's a work ethic, it's a mindset that you have to instill into those guys. And Coach Hazel today at the end of our 6 a.m. workouts, I think he said something about there were 4 or 5 games in November that, I don't know if there was a 10-point swing or something like that. So it's just us learning how to finish and compete in those situations when it's not easy. I think that's where we need to take that next step is when something bad happens, how do you respond? And it's just as much as our responsibility to keep them going, but somebody has to step up and make a play or be a leader for us to take that next step.
Yeah, one more question before we go to break.
Only one more 6 a.m. left tomorrow. Just generally, what have you thought of those workouts?
I thought they've been great. We've kind of changed up the dynamics of them, which I think has helped our guys and kept it fresh a little bit and entertaining. But I think our guys
entertaining.
A little bit entertaining. Entertaining
Not
for me.
interrupt,
when we get back into the staff room, when we start talking about who. No,
entertaining for you. Okay.
But I think it's been great. I think our guys have pushed themselves harder than we've ever seen. So I think that's always a positive going to spring practice.
Yeah, no question. All right, we're going to be back. We're going to talk Maryland basketball, and then maybe a little bit of that next segment, and get into more with Jafar Williams in our second segment on Gold and Black Live. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.